Hello humans, it's just Martine, and it's time for a double-blind book challenge. I'm a graduate student studying legal psychology, and one of the recommendations legal psychologists give most in the criminal justice system is to adopt the use of a double-blind administration for any particular test. For example, if you're giving somebody a lineup, we recommend that you use a double-blind administration. What is a double-blind administration? It's basically when you have a task and the person administering the task and the person completing the task don't know what the result is supposed to be. And I thought it would be interesting to combine my two worlds, my school and my channel, and do a double-blind book challenge. The only way I could think of to get at the idea of a double-blind administration, and this is not perfect, was to have 3 friends recommend me 2 books. One of those books was supposed to be a book they thought I would enjoy, and one of those books was supposed to be a book they thought I would not enjoy. Just in a text message, no other information about the book. They were supposed to tell me what the book was, and then I was going to take it, administer it to myself by having myself read it, and then see what the results were, whether I liked the book or I disliked the book. And then afterwards, we would see, did their prediction of which book I like match which book I liked, and did their prediction of the book I disliked match the book I disliked. Now, I say this is not a perfect double-blind administration because the person who was administering the books, meaning me, did have some preconceived biases about which I would like and dislike. And those biases may well have impacted what I liked and disliked. So if anything, people should take this as a demonstration of what is not a good double-blind administration, or maybe even not double-blind at all. We can argue back and forth about it, but I just thought it was cute to call it a double-blind book challenge, okay? And this is booktube, not school, so I can do what I want. So let's flash back to April when I got the book lists from my 3 friends and I made my predictions about what I would like and dislike and why. Okay, I am here on April 29th before I start reading any of these books to give you some of my initial predictions. Let's start with Lizzie's picks. We have Wilder Girls and Sawkill Girls. This one's tricky because obviously Lizzie did some very clever thinking about these books and they look very similar. They both have a girl with brown hair on the cover. The covers are a little weird. They both have another word and then the word girls in the title. But I will say I heard a lot less about Sawkill Girls when it came out compared to Wilder Girls, and even though that typically doesn't speak to my preferences, that's kind of the only information I have to go off of. I also find the cover to Wilder Girls a bit more intriguing than the cover for Sawkill Girls, so I'm going to say that Wilder Girls is the one that I'm going to like, or that Lizzie would think that I would like. That's my blind prediction. Next, let's talk about Bailey's picks. Bailey picked The New Husband and Game Changer, and I really haven't heard what either of these ones are about at all, but one looks like more of a mystery thriller, specifically like a domestic thriller situation, and then Game Changer, I have no idea what it's about. Neil Shusterman often does dystopian. That doesn't mean this is a dystopian, that just means that's what I know Neil Shusterman's writing for. I also have to say I've read Neil Shusterman before. I haven't read this other author, and generally I like Neil Shusterman's writing. That's one of the reasons that I think I'm going to like Game Changer more than The New Husband. Also, I think Bailey is very aware that in mystery and thrillers, there are sometimes some tropes that really ruin it for me. I feel like the likelihood of The New Husband having a trope that I hate in it is much higher than the chances of Game Changer having a trope that I hate in it, just because of its genre. So my official prediction is that I'm going to like Game Changer and that I'm going to dislike The New Husband. And then finally, for my sister's picks, she gave me Long Shot and Unfortunately Yours. And when we were discussing this video idea months before she even picked these, we were talking about, oh, you know, how funny would it be if I gave you like a cutesy cover that was actually the steamy romance and then one that looked like a steamy romance that was really like a good, just a solid good romance book. And so I know the game she's trying to play here. And so part of me wants to predict that I'm going to like Long Shot and then I'm not going to like Unfortunately Yours, because I know she probably went in with that specific mindset in trying to trick me. On the other hand, I cannot move past my biases, and even though I know for a fact that Tessa Bailey writes some things that I don't like reading in books, I'm going to let the illustrated cover potentially lead me astray. I just don't feel like there's any way I'm going to like Long Shot, so this is more a matter of me doubting Long Shot instead of believing I'll like the Tessa Bailey. because I also don't think that's the case. And I know she's trying to trick me, but I cannot in my heart choose Unfortunately Yours as the one that I'm going to hate. So I'm going to say that I'm going to like Unfortunately Yours more than Longshot. And I'm going to rue this day. Those are my official initial predictions, and now I can finally start reading the books. Okay, so I started by reading Wilder Girls for this, and I know my initial prediction was that this was supposed to be the one that I liked, but now I realize I'm pretty sure that prediction is incredibly wrong, although now it's not a blind analysis, but having still not read Sawkill Girls, I'm pretty sure this is the one I was not supposed to like. I did end up giving it 3 stars, like it wasn't bad. I think the 3 stars are entirely for the setup because the end of the book was terrible, and I hadn't looked at reviews of this before, and I looked at reviews of this after, and that was pretty much the consensus. They were like, great concept. What happened? I feel like there were definitely some people who really loved this book. The setting is an island, and we're at this school for girls, and basically this weird disease began, and so the island is kind of quarantined from the rest of the world, and girls are dying, and the symptoms are just really strange and grotesque. Like, that's definitely why it's a horror, is the description of the things that are happening to their bodies. And I mean, I think you can probably tell that from like the cover. I think the cover expresses the tone pretty well. And so we're kind of following this main character. We're technically following 2 main perspectives. One is a girl who's, you know, still at the school, and she has just been kind of elevated to this new position where she gets to go meet the boat that is sending them supplies, and she starts to learn that maybe there are some things around that are a lot more sinister than she ever realized. We're also following this perspective of one of the girls who gets taken from the school and kind of like experimented on, I guess. So we're following those 2 perspectives and see where they pass each other by, converge, diverge, etc. So again, I think we had this really interesting setup, and then the ending was just, what? Like, the explanations we got, some of it was interesting, most of it was just confusing, and then the ending felt so abrupt. I don't know, I did not know how to feel after this. So those 3 stars are for, I think, the tone of the book. It was definitely eerie and weird island vibes, and then the setup was interesting, but like, what did it do? You know, what did it do? So I obviously have to stand by my initial prediction and say that my initial prediction was that this would be the one that I liked, but now that I've read this and I have some more information, I think this is supposed to be the one I didn't like. I hope. This video is going to be so awkward when I say, like, I hated this book, I think this is the one I was supposed to hate, and then, like, somebody comes in a video and says, like, I think Martine's gonna love this book for these reasons, you know? It'll be interesting to see. High entertainment value. Sorry to my friends. So when I was originally devising this idea, I really just wanted a way to have my friends pick a book that I wouldn't like and a book that I'd like and see if they were correct. And I made it vaguely psychology themed because that's what I do. And then I so accidentally demonstrated so many psychological constructs just in the way that I acted in this video. Let's talk about suggestibility. So, suggestibility is when you take outside information, you incorporate it, and it impacts your memory and your beliefs. And so one reason people can have false memories is because they are given information, they integrate it, and upon reconstructing a memory, they integrate that false information into their memory, because memory is not a perfect process. We're building it up. So what you just saw was me actively and not on purpose laying the groundwork for a false memory. And I was so very tempted to fix this in editing, to go back and to make myself not make the mistakes that I'm about to make for the rest of the video, or at least the rest of Lizzie's section. But I said, you know what? It's supposed to be a video about psychology. And I just want to show you why double-blind administration is important. Because when you don't have double-blind administration, the administrator can be suggesting things that are then incorporated into a person's memory. Here's a good example. So if you're giving somebody a lineup and you give them cues that a certain person might be the suspect, then they choose that person as a suspect. When they're reconstructing their memory of that choice, they may not remember where the information came from that the individual was a suspect. It did not come from their memory of the perpetrator, it came from the cues from the investigator. In this way, they remember, it was me, I chose this person because they were the perpetrator. Great, and that's how wrongful convictions happened. So I just wrongfully convicted these books for real, because I initially predicted that I would like Wilder Girls. When I read Wilder Girls, I remembered that, but I said, I think what it actually was supposed to be was that I didn't like Wilder Girls. And you're about to see for the rest of the video, up through my reaction to seeing what Lizzie predicted, the entire time, for months and months and months, I'm going to believe I always predicted that I would not like Wilder Girls. Complete false memory. Just horrifically embarrassing. So I'll come back later to talk about some of the results of that. But I just want you to know I'm about to sound so stupid, and people don't believe that false memories are easy to make, but here I'm showing you they're so easy to make. So just watch this and we'll catch up later. Okay, Lizzie's second pick was Sawkill Girls, and my prediction was that this was supposed to be the one that I was going to like. This is the one that I liked better. I ended up giving this 4 stars. I still don't know if it's the one that Lizzie thought I would like better. I guess we'll find out. In this one, we're following 3 girls, and the story largely revolves around the setting of this island. One of the girls is new to the island. She moves there with her mom and her sister. One is the daughter of the sheriff, and the third is the daughter of a very famous rich family on the island. And the plot of the story really revolves around the fact that girls keep going missing from this island. Some of our main characters are trying to find out what's happening, some are trying to stop what's happening, etc. It's pretty interesting. Didn't know that it was going to have ace representation in it, so I was very pleased about that. And it was good representation too. Like, I really enjoyed reading that part of it. I also feel like, especially compared to Wilder Girls, maybe the plot was more cohesive and made more sense. I feel like this one really just leaned into mystical, magical things, and that really made some of the things in this book easier to go along with. It also had a very similar vibe, even though it's a very different book, to Slewfoot by Brom. There's something about it, just the like foresty monster vibe, really. And so I was thinking a lot about that book while I was reading this, even though this one doesn't have to do with witches and is not a historical piece. Like, there are so many reasons it's not at all like Slewfoot, but for some reason the vibes were similar in my mind. So I enjoyed the like setting and vibes and all of those things. It lost me a bit in the action sequences. There was a lot of action near the end. There were some things that were a little too mystical that I couldn't really fully wrap my head around, but overall I felt like this one just stood a lot more firmly than Wilder Girls did. So I was pleased with my reading experience overall. Let's see what Lizzie thought was going to happen.
Hello, Martine. It's a human. It's Lizzie, and I am here to recommend you 2 books for your 12 TBRs video, where one of these I think you will like, and one of these I think you will dislike. So the 2 books that I recommended to you were Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand and Wilder Girls by Rory Power. So I wanted to pick 2 books that were very kind of similar, but again, like, one I think you'll like and one I think you'll dislike. So these
did
books
love
are
how similar
both
they were.
YA feminist sapphic horror, which is like very specific for 2 books to have that also have very similar titles. And I actually read them both back in like 2021, and I gave them both 3 stars, but I remember one of them fondly and one of them not. Like, I remember liking one of them and disliking one of them. The other one, even though they both got 3 stars from me. So whatever that says about my rating system, that's a conversation for another day. But I thought you would like Wilder Girls by Rory Power and dislike Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. Now, this is because I felt like, and again, it's been a long time since I read these. So, from my memory, Wilder Girls has much more of like a sci-fi dystopian horror vibe, kind of like conspiracy situation. It goes all the way to the top, which I feel like is more your jam. And Sawkill Girls has more of a supernatural horror vibe, which I felt like was maybe less your jam. And I remember finding the ending of Wilder Girls quite satisfying and like how it all wrapped up and came together.
The end of the book was terrible.
And I thought the ending of Sawkill Girls was very frustrating and let me down. So obviously I'm not going to spoil what those endings are, but yeah, I'm super excited to see what you thought, and whether you guessed correctly or if you actually thought, liked and disliked the ones I thought you would like or dislike. So I cannot wait to see this video, and thank you so much for having me choose books for you. I hope you liked them, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Lizzie's predictions make total sense now. I see where she was coming from. She's completely accurate. Typically, I prefer sci-fi dystopian, especially in my horror, more than I do supernatural fantastical things. Just because I like more tangible, real things. It's one of the reasons sci-fi works for me and fantasy often doesn't, is my brain can accept things that seem a lot more grounded in the reality that I'm familiar with than things grounded in a different or alternate reality. So I think her prediction was genius. We will never know whether I liked Sawkill Girls better than Wilder Girls because I had predicted that would be the case. Completely can know that it's not based on the prediction, or at least the original prediction, because you did not originally predict you would like Sawkill Girls. And this is why double-blind administration is important, because my memory of my prediction came not from the actual prediction itself, but from the information I got from the books. And this false memory that I created after reading Wilder Girls. So, from my memory of the two of them, it was very much a writing and the way it did or did not stick in my head. The fantastical explanations in Sawkill Girls still landed easier than the explanations in Wilder Girls, and I don't know if that's how I was reading it or what, but there was just something in Wilder Girls that didn't make total sense to me. Clearly, that's not a universal experience with these two books, because Lizzie seemed to have the exact opposite experience that I did, wherein she felt like the ending of Wilder Girls made more sense and was more satisfying than the end of Sawkill Girls. And the end of Sawkill Girls, if I'm remembering, does have some ambiguity and some like continuation factors, but I did feel like it wrapped up and made sense to me. So that's fascinating. I think Lizzie very much made a correct prediction and a logical prediction in the accurate and true things she knows about my reading. I just think for some reason those things were kind of turned on their heads in this case, which is fascinating and one of the reasons to do this project. That's very cool. So thank you, Lizzie, for a very thoughtful pick where the reasoning that you had was spot on, just didn't land quite right in these two books. And also, you did such a good job of picking books that seemed like they would be incredibly similar, but you had very specific reasons for believing I would like or dislike them. Just great job. Thank you, Lizzie. Okay, on to the next one.
Okay, the first book that I read from Bailey's picks was the one that I thought I wouldn't like, and that was The New Husband. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars, and now that I've read it, I'm a little more of a question mark as to which of these books I'm supposed to like and which I'm supposed to dislike. I had said in my initial prediction that I would probably dislike this one because Bailey knows that there are some psychological thriller tropes that I really, really hate. And I would say this bordered on some of those, but I also feel like it didn't. Let me say more about this book and then we can talk about it. Basically, the setup of this book is that we're following this woman, and about a year ago, her husband disappeared, and they don't know if he's dead or alive, if he abandoned the family, what, like they have no idea. So she's kind of moved on, and she's moving her and her kids in with her new boyfriend, who is a teacher at her kid's school. Her daughter is really not adjusting well to this situation, which is weird because her daughter is usually quite well behaved, but her daughter's putting up a big stink about this new guy. And it's called the new husband because like he wants to be her husband, like he wants him to get married, and she's like, this is a little fast, like you need to calm down. And as the story continues, at first it's really unclear if you're supposed to have the same perspective as the mom or the daughter. And then you find out more information, and I think that question is kind of clarified pretty distinctly. Here's where I'll kind of talk about the book, but again, I'm really trying not to spoil this, but I have to talk about some specific psychological thriller tropes so that you can understand where I'm coming from and why I'm like a little confused about how I feel about this. So the psychological thriller trope that I really hate is when it turns out that the person who was the bad guy and like doing things is labeled as being like psychotic when they are revealed. And it's very clear once this reveal happens that there's something like horrifically wrong with them mentally, but you haven't seen that behavior this whole time. And the truth of the matter is that like when you're having these intense psychological issues, like you cannot hide that, right? And so I think where this book worked is that the bad guy was not psychotic, but I do think they were trying to portray him as a psychopath. And that worked a lot better because the thing about psychopaths is that if they have a specific goal in mind for themselves, they can be incredibly charming to try and get that goal. They can go through the motions and look like they don't have these issues because they've picked up the behavior of other people. They study other people's behavior really well, and so they know how to act correctly. They just only do that when it benefits them, basically. And so I feel like there was a character in this book that very much fit that, and I think that's what the author was trying to go for. And so it's really hard for me to tell in this moment without knowing Bailey's analysis if that meant that I'm supposed to love it because I think they genuinely did something psychologically like pretty well, or if she thought that I would hate that because it's kind of, you know, he acts one way in certain situations and in another, and I've clarified that when it's in the case of like psychosis that's not psychologically accurate. So I can't tell if she thinks it's psychologically accurate or not. So I think to make my final analysis before I see what she thinks I'd like and dislike, I'm going to have to read the other book and kind of see what's up with that, because where I'm standing right now, I feel like it could go either way and have been interpreted either way. As it stands, since I gave it 3.5 stars, like I liked it well enough. I do feel like it got repetitive at some points, and I just, like, it didn't freak me out as much as I wanted it to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know. And like there were some decisions made. I think the big reveal halfway through that we got, I'm not sure that I loved that reveal. Like it made different parts of the ending interesting, but I'm just not sure how I felt about that in general. Anyway, so like it was a pretty good book, but I'm really having trouble identifying, is this supposed to be the book I really liked, or is this supposed to be the book I really didn't like? So I guess we'll have to see.
Okay, Bailey, I see what you did there. For Bailey's second selection, I read Game Changer by Neil Shusterman, and I predicted before reading this that this would be the book that I liked. And I'm pretty sure I'm correct because I gave Game Changer 4.5 stars. I loved the messaging of this book, but it lost a half star because the writing style was not really it. The theming was very in your face, not subtle at all. I understand in terms of this message, maybe that was necessary, but it just took me out of the story a little bit. So there's that. How to explain this book? This book is largely social commentary about the world and privilege and all of those things. But it starts out a lot simpler than that. In the beginning, we're following this guy, Ash, and he is a football player. And one night when he is playing football, he makes a tackle and something feels a little weird. Not like concussion weird, but like weird. Everything seems to be fine after, like he's doing fine, he drives home, and then he almost gets into an accident, and he realizes it's because he missed the last stop sign. He didn't register that there was a stop sign because the stop sign was blue. And he's like, why is that stop sign blue? And his friend is like, bro, stop signs are blue. So clearly something has changed. And as the story continues and he plays more football games, we see him go into stranger and stranger parallel worlds, basically. And we get a lot of commentary for that because his situation changes depending on the universe he's in. His family starts off not very wealthy. In one universe, they are wealthy. I don't want to spoil everything, but like that's the essence of it. He just gets different privileges and sees them taken away from different groups of people depending on the universe that he's in. And he's trying to figure out how to go back to the place that he came from, because it's not perfect, but it's better than these subsequent realities. It was really eerie to read this at the time that I did, which I think is especially why it hit, because I read it the week after the election here in the United States. And this book was written like near the tail end of the COVID-19 pandemic, around the 2020 election. And so a lot of the feelings that were being felt and the thoughts that were being thought throughout the country very much applied to the current moment that I'm sitting in right now. It was kind of painful in a way to read it because it was just very, very on the nose about the whole situation. That being said, I really liked it, and I think it's a really creative way to talk about privilege and the difference between sympathy and empathy, the difference between understanding what somebody is going through and saying you understand what somebody is going through. I think that was huge. Like, the main realization that our main character comes to over and over again in this book is like he had no idea how difficult it was to be this type of person, this type of person, this type of person. He had no idea that he was even ignorant of it. He thought he was showing up and doing the work and being a good person, but he was missing out on a lot because it was easy to miss out because it didn't apply to his life. So that's a great message. And I think this was a really easy way to consume that. It's a really quick read. I read it pretty much in one day. It's a YA sci-fi. I thought it was really approachable. I think it will be banned in places, which makes me like it more. So overall, this better be the one that Bailey thought that I would like, because it would be so awkward if it wasn't. But I guess it's time to find out.
Hello, Martine. I picked 2 books for you to read, one of which I was supposed to think you would not enjoy, and one that I thought you would enjoy. It's been a few moons since I even told you what these books were that I chose, to the fact that I had to ask you to remind me what the 2 books were. But the funny thing is that I instantly remembered which was which. And both of these books I gave very high ratings. One I gave a 4-star and one I gave a 5-star. So I had you read Game Changer by Neil Shusterman, which is a YA sci-fi that I loved. And I also had you read The New Husband by DJ Palmer, which is an adult mystery that I loved. And selfishly, I just really wanted you to read both of these books, and I'm hoping that it wasn't too obvious right off the bat which one I thought you would not like and which one I thought you would. But to me it was obvious, because I thought that you would not like The New Husband by DJ Palmer, because you run into the issue so often of like knowing too much and like seeing the plot holes in things of investigations and figuring stuff out. So I really wanted you to read this. I feel like you let this pass you by when I read it and loved it, so I wanted to shove it towards you. Of course, I'm hoping that you did end up liking it and we're able to look past some of the things that are sometimes hard in mysteries. It's also been a while now since I read that book, and I'm trying to remember how much like investigation versus just the family experiencing the things happened. But there's something in this book that I won't spoil for the other people, but I like the year I read it said like, I read a book this year with this thing, but I don't want to like tell anybody what book it was, and it's this book. So I'm hoping that you and I can talk about that thing exists in this book. But then the book I thought you would love is Game Changer by Neil Shusterman. Neil Shusterman is a favorite author of mine. Like I said, I only gave this one 4 stars, but I feel like you and I, or at least you, tend to enjoy the YA that I enjoy, and you are also a lover of YA YA sci-fi. And I also feel like for Neil Shusterman, this book specifically didn't get the hype that some of his books do. So again, I wanted to make sure you knew to have this on your radar, and this was the one I thought that you would love, because there's really nothing here that I feel like doesn't vibe with what you also like. So that's what I chose. I'm excited to see this whole episode of 12 TBRs. So those are the books, and I love you, and Merry Christmas.
So I'm glad I got that prediction right. So the good news, Bailey, when you're watching this, is that I didn't hate The New Husband. I just didn't love it. And like I said in my review, the only thing I disliked about Game Changer was that the writing was a bit simplistic at times. That made it compulsively readable, but it just didn't fully land in some places, which is why it got, I believe, 4.5 stars instead of 5. Again, I still liked The New Husband and I gave it 3.5 stars. And then Game Changer was just, yeah, so good. And I truly hadn't ever heard of it. I've read so many other books by Neil Shusterman and loved most of them, if not all of them that I've read. Like, I'm trying to think of a Neil Shusterman that didn't slap for me. And this one really landed. So you did a great job with that. We were on the same page and it turned out to reflect reality. So that's exciting.
Wow, I'm so conflicted about this review that I'm about to deliver. Okay, so I read Michaela's first pick, Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. It's my first Kennedy Ryan. I know she's really popular, especially as a sports romance author. I'm not really sure I've actually read a dedicated sports romance before. I do think I'm right in that this is the book I'm supposed to like, and I'm giving it 4 stars, but I have so many caveats about that 4 stars. Okay, so the basic premise of this book is there's this girl, she's graduating college, and she is dating a guy who's drafted into the NBA, so it's a basketball romance, but at the same time, around when she's graduating, she meets this other dude, basically the rival of her boyfriend, who's also going into the NBA, and they have a pretty immediate connection, but she stays with this other guy for reasons, and then things get really, 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 really dark and terrible for a really long time with her current boyfriend. So you need to look up trigger warnings if you even want to consider reading this. The way that I'll put it is that I study legal psychology, and part of that is that I study real life cases of terrible things. I read about terrible things that have happened to people. I listen to people talk about terrible things that have happened to them. And yet there was something about reading some of the scenes in this book that depicted the things that happened to this main character that were like even way too much for me to deal with. And that caught me off guard because that's never really happened before, but it was just, wow, the things happening to her were terrible. I also was really worried that we were going to continue reading about like horrible scene after horrible scene after horrible scene of things happening to her for the whole book. And so like I would say the worst of it probably happens around 50%, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this for another half of a book, you know? I think the reason that this was recommended to me is because, you know, traditionally I'd be like, romance, I know, not really my thing, but this is like a very heavy topic, and it's a topic that I care a lot about. Survivors' rights, that's like a big area of interest and research and advocacy for me. I see why this was recommended to me, and I do think the author did a good job of saying something really, really important, and she also did a good job in her acknowledgments of thanking the people who lent their time and their stories to help her understand the perspective of the main character, which I really appreciated, because sometimes people write these things and they have no input from survivors when they do so. So I was at least glad to see that. I hesitate to recommend this book for a couple of reasons. One, it is just so dark and graphic about its dark descriptions. And 2, there were parts in which the writing was like not the best, but here's what I will say. I think it covered a really important topic. This author always promises that her characters get happy endings, so you can go in knowing that, which is the only thing that got me through, I'd say. And I do feel like the main character and the actual love interest of the story had chemistry. It's not rare, but it's less common for me to read a book with a romance that I really feel like the characters have chemistry than it is to read a book with a romance where I feel like the characters do have chemistry, and these characters definitely had chemistry. Some of it was a little over the top at times, but at the end of the day, I did feel like they had a connection and I was rooting for them. It maybe took me a while to get there, but I was. I don't know how I feel about this book. I'm like, I don't ever want to recommend it to anybody. Maybe. And yet it was good. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. Am I glad I read it? Yeah, I guess. It's over and we're okay. And it was a good book. Oh, I will say, be warned that it has like 3 epilogues because I was reading the epilogue and it said I had like a minute left in the chapter and I was like, almost done this book. I looked at Bookly at the time that I did that and it said I'd been reading for an hour because I did a real long sprint through the craziness at the end. And yet the book did not finish until I had been reading for an hour 41 minutes because there were 3 epilogues. Actually, maybe 4. All of them as long, if not longer, than the actual chapters in the book. So just know that. If you do decide for some reason to read this book, but please, 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 please look up trigger warnings before, because it was rough. Okay.
I deeply hope that this was supposed to be the book that I didn't like, because I didn't like it. I read Unfortunately Yours, and unfortunately I gave it 2.5 stars, which means it wasn't the worst. There were moments where I found myself enjoying it, but overall, not really my vibe. Not my thing. It's actually, I believe, my first Tessa Bailey book, so that's interesting. This should probably tell me to stay away from Tessa Bailey books, and will I? Who's to say? I've been known to make bad reading decisions before. For instance, the concept of this video. Who says give me one book you think I like and one book you think I'll hate? And then reads them. So let's see. This one, it's technically the 2nd book in a series, but because it's a romance series, that really doesn't matter. In this one, we're following 2 characters. That's pretty normal for a romance book. One is in the finance district, but she has family ties to Napa and making wine. And then the guy is a former Navy SEAL who has started up a winery in honor of his best friend who he lost in battle. And he's terrible at making wine. And these two kind of have a weird feud going because she judges wine a lot and his is terrible. And then they suddenly agree to get married because her trust fund won't be released unless she is married. And he needs a small business loan, and for some reason she can help him with that. So they decide to get married in a marriage of convenience, except that they hate each other, ? And things go from there. You know, obviously they fall in love. I don't feel like that's a spoiler for a romance book. But yeah, these two just had something going on that I really didn't care for, and that's fine. Good for them. You know, I'm glad that they had a good time. I sent Michaela a Snapchat reading some lines that really weren't for me in this book, and I was like, how dare you make me read this book? And she was like, I totally forgot that line happened, and she laughed hysterically at me. So I think, didn't in the beginning of this I say, is this the one that I'm supposed to like because of the illustrated cover? I don't really know where I'm standing on this, but having read both of the options, this definitely feels like the one that wasn't supposed to be for me. And if it was, then that's embarrassing. I'm glad it's called Unfortunately Yours because a lot of it just did feel unfortunate for me and my preferences. I'm sure lots and lots of people have enjoyed this book and will enjoy this book, and my enjoyment means nothing about the actual quality, but it's just not written for me, and that's okay. Michaela picked 2 of my books. You picked Longshot and you picked Unfortunately Yours. Before I tell you what I thought, I want to hear what your intentions were with these 2 books. Yeah, so I think my intention here was really to show something about the trend that's currently going on with the book covers. How, you know, they're trying to have all these cutesy romance covers versus one Longshot, which had very much a kind of smoldering half-naked man on the cover. It did. And just kind of juxtaposing with the fact that I did not like one of those books and I liked one of those books, and I thought you would feel similarly about it. I also thought I really wanted to find a romance that you would enjoy because I know they do exist, and that talked about topics that you find to be important and worth discussing. And so that was really my goal with Longshot. But yeah, mostly a statement on modern covers of romance novels. So you had told me, like as a joke, that this was probably going to be what you were going to do. And so part of me in my initial predictions wanted to go, well, she set it up to do it this way, so I'm going to ruin her intention and say that I don't expect that I'll like the Tessa Bailey book, and I do expect that I'll like Longshot, because I knew that's what you were trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, no, play the game. Play the game. Play the game, admit to your own biases. So I did, and I said, I'll probably enjoy Unfortunately Yours, and I'll probably dislike Longshot, blah, 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 blah. But largely your predictions were correct. I gave Longshot 4 stars, and I gave Unfortunately Yours 2.5 stars. Yeah, I did not love that book. And I have to tell you, I don't know if you'll think this is a good or a bad thing, but out of all the books that I read for this particular video, so out of everybody's choices, this was the meant to dislike book that I disliked the most. Nailed it. Good job. Thank you. Any last words? Don't judge a book by its cover. And yeah, Tessa Bailey has much better books than that one, so find a better Tessa Bailey book. You heard it here first. Just to recap, I asked 3 of my friends to pick 2 books each, one they thought I'd like, one they thought I'd dislike. I made my initial predictions about which I thought I would like and dislike, then read them and saw what happened. I got all my initial predictions correct, in that every book that I thought they thought I would like was the book they thought I would like, and every book I thought they thought I would dislike was the book they thought I would dislike. And in most cases, those predictions were accurate, but not in the case of Sawkill Girls versus Wilder Girls. And that one was such a surprise that I created a completely false memory about the whole thing to convince myself that I always thought I would like Sawkill Girls, because it was so weird to me that I liked that one better, I guess. So psychology is crazy, false memories happen, and this is why documentation matters. This is the same reason we should record lineup procedures and interviews, interrogations, etc., because otherwise I would have always and forever believed that my initial prediction was that I would dislike Wilder Girls. But we have proof, on film proof, that that's not what I said. So if you like this video, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up and comment down below. Out of these 3 pairs of books, which books do you predict that you would like and which do you predict you would dislike? And subscribe for more bookish and college lifestyle content. And until next time, bye humans, bye!